Is this a protest? I think you've got an oil shower. That's close. Yeah, maybe we're Is there anything you'd like to say, sir? Is there anything you'd like to say?
You're gonna win.
I know it. I know it.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Todd, and here we are this morning outside Marshall Wace, which are one of the biggest hedge fund investors in the world, currently investing in 112 fossil fuel companies, including Shell, Equinor, and Chevron. And in fact, the chairman of Marshall Wace is a man called Paul Marshall. Now, Paul Marshall actually also owns, is a co-founder of GB News, and GB News have just recently been found out to be spreading climate disinformation, hatred, and intolerance, whilst the government have just announced this new definition of extremism. So we're here today demanding that either the government or the police arrest the extremists inside this building who are peddling climate disinformation, hate and intolerance in the midst of a climate and ecological crisis. So my name's Todd, as I used to be. Yeah, let's go have a look. So yeah, you can see we've got oil sprayed, well, symbolic oil to be sprayed overhead the building there to symbolize all of the oil that this hedge fund is ultimately responsible for in their investments and is destroying our ecosystems as we speak. We've got rebels up on the roof there with a banner saying "Rebel for Truth," and we're asking them to cut the ties. There's been several Ofcom regulations already, and they should ultimately be shut down. Like the same man, Paul Marshall, who owns this hedge fund, is actually a major, if not the lead, I believe, a leading donor to the Conservative Party, who have recently got Lord Walney to supposedly independently come out with this new definition of extremism. So we've got someone here on the scene that might be able to tell us a bit more. Hi there. Can you tell us why you're here today and what this means to you?
Well, I'm as concerned as anyone who is aware of what these people do. Extremist is the right word, although their website, Marshall Wace's website, is incredibly overt, brazen greenwash. And I can quote from it.
Please do.
We are committed to acting with integrity and accountability. Lie. Because they keep this all quiet. We have a robust moral and ethical code. Laughable. Sustainable investing is part of how we fulfill our duty to act in our clients' best interests, not in our best interests. Marshall Wace is committed to achieving positive social and environmental impacts. And given that what you've just said, about 112, was it 112?
That's correct, yeah.
It's brazen. It's absolutely brazen. And it's an extraordinary journey that Paul Marshall has been on. And I see it with so many neoliberal ideologues. Their blinkers have just done that. He started off as a fluffy Lib Dem, socially aware. He did a lot of good work for the Department for Education. He even pushed for better science teaching in inner city schools. Better science teaching. All of that's disappeared. He set up this company with George Soros, of course, who GB News now regard as the devil incarnate. It's part of that basket of strange ideological things that they have to buy into. Climate deniers always buy into the conspiracy theories. GB News has platformed Jordan Peterson. It platforms a lot of the presenters, like Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis, are members of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group of Parliament, who are in turn, all roads lead to Tufton Street. All roads lead to the Global Warming Policy Foundation. All roads lead to climate denial. So this bit of greenwashing is just for the birds.
Right. And so, like, look, I grew up on a council estate in Essex, and I used to read the Sun newspaper, the Telegraph. Like, I had no idea of these lies that I was reading in the media, to the point that I actually went and got a job in the fossil fuel industry. I chased my dream and become an airline pilot. Now I can't fly anymore because I understand the science, and you know, I'm still in 80 grand worth of debt. And you know, if these media organisations actually told the truth, what this actually means for me is like, this guy that owns this hedge fund is worth 800 million, and this hedge fund has got what 1.8 billion in these fossil fuel interests, and then they're trying to, you know, spout all this misinformation. I think a third of their presenters are outright climate deniers, and over half have been attacking climate action.
And of course, the reason, let this go past, the reason he's happy to make a loss with GB News is because he keeps over there, which keeps his investments safe. So pushing this climate denial stuff 24 hours a day. GB News 24 hours, I've never watched it. It makes me feel sick, 5 minutes of it. It's so toxic. But anyway, if he keeps pushing and pushing, then he hopes that whatever loss he's making will drown out anything that threatens his investments. And the loss he's making is tiny compared to the profits that he is making from the fossil fuel industries.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So are we going over to the other site now? Okay. Thanks. And we'll see you soon.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm John Fuller. I do a stack of Tell the Truth campaigning with Extinction Rebellion. And today we are outside the offices of GB News. Now, you'd think that GB News, like any news provider, should have the right to freedom of speech.
Okay. You're gonna win.
I know it. I know it.
Good luck.
Madam, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing here today?
My name is Ines, and as you can see, I'm contributing to bring to notice to people around here what kind of organization there are. This is Marshall Wace, and it's a hedge fund, one of the biggest in Europe, and they own enormous shares in the fossil fuel industry. And that in itself is bad enough, considering also that they portray themselves as being sustainable, to adopt sustainable processes and operations. And the reality is the contrary. Not only, as I said, they have huge investment in fossil fuel companies, but also they are the owner the chair of Marshall Wace is also a co-owner of GB News, and everybody knows what GB News is. It harbors the most ardent supporters of anti-climate, not anti-climate, but denialist of the climate crisis. And is also very interested in very extreme right-wing causes, and the kind of person that can influence a lot of people with his perverse ideas, both about climate and societies as it is.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you.
And hello, if you just joined us, we're here outside Marshall Wace in Sloane Square, London. Marshall Wace is one of the biggest hedge fund investors in the world, currently investing in over 112 different fossil fuel entities. And the guy, Paul Marshall, that also owns this massive hedge fund, is also the co-founder of GB News, which are notorious for spreading disinformation about the climate crisis. In fact, during the midst of the 40-degree summer heat wave, he was spouting that this was alarmism, but it wasn't, even though the Met Office and Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change were saying this is linked to climate breakdown. They were saying the opposite. So very, very dangerous and very extreme narratives we're hearing from that news channel. In fact, we're just going to see if anyone here could speak to us first. Would you like to just tell us a bit about why you're here today? And
yes, well, I have actually made an official complaint to Ofcom because of GB News. I thought I'd have a look at them, and within 2 minutes I was complaining. In their news headlines at 2:00 one afternoon, they were talking about the terrorism, and they mentioned the Manchester Arena bombings, that terrible incident, and they showed flags, people waving Palestinian flags. And I think that juxtaposition, that they are allowed to get away with putting things like that for anybody to watch, is just appalling. So I was quite honestly quite delighted to be here today to make my protest felt. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I understand Paul Marshall has been using his Twitter platform to like and retweet conspiracy theories online, far-right extremists, racist comments. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And Tom, could you tell us a little bit more about your background, or Marshall Wace specifically?
Well, it's what I see as the insidious thing is the cancer. This is all part of what's a cancer in the body politic, but in society generally. And that cancer, all roads lead to Tufton Street. There's 1 or 2 degrees separation between Tufton Street and really horrible far-right stuff, global stuff. Tufton Street allies itself with Alternative for Deutschland, which advocates shooting migrants. It launders its money through Donors Trust, which is a huge funder of white supremacism in America. They are deep, dark people, and they've metastasized in Parliament. Every single part of my research over the last few years is looking into every single government department. Every single minister has advisors which come from the fossil fuel propagandists of Tufton Street. And all the Tufton Street think tanks, 19 of them, I think, including the Legatum Institute, which is half owner of GB News, they're all the same group. The whistleblower, Samir Shani, revealed that actually they're all the same group. So they just put different hats on for different audiences. But they are the dark star of climate denial, extremism, and threat.
To someone sitting at home that wants to believe that we live in a democracy and that we can trust our politicians, and that when we watch the news, we should be able to trust the information being received, what would you say to them?
People often say that the government has a client press. Actually, the government are the clients of the press, who are the propagandists, press and GB News and broadcasters, who are the propagandists for the fossil fuel companies. We don't have a government. We have We have shady, clandestine people interested in money and profit at the expense of their own children. That's what I don't get. Is they have children. I'm here because I have children, and 5 years ago, when the IPCC report came out, I went from a comfortable life to daily panic for my children, and I cannot understand how all of these people, university educated, suddenly drank the Kool-Aid. We've had the red pill. For some reason or other, they've put a blindfold on.
Is it as simple as just to say, like, these people are addicted to their wealth, their greed, and that sort of narrow-minded thinking just means that they literally can't see that we're in this existential moment for life on Earth?
That can be the only answer: power and money. I cannot fathom how that mindset works, and unfortunately, as I say, it's spread like a cancer. And they're fifth columnists. These people are working on behalf of a foreign power, i.e., American oil money, to the detriment of people in this country. They're as bad as, Lord Paul. In fact, Paul Marshall's journey from fluffy Lib Dem to extremist over time, it's almost as though he was embedded, as a sleeper agent to emerge at this point in history.
Well, okay, fair enough.
I over-egg the point.
Yeah. Okay. And like, I've been on GB News before, and I was there trying to talk about the stark reality that the United Nations General Secretary said that climate activists are not dangerous radicals, that any government that continues to pursue new oil licenses are. This is something that all of the Tory backbencher MPs that come onto GB News, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and they all are trying to get rid of net zero. Nigel Farage is another one, and they're just being platformed on this. When I went on GB News, they wouldn't even let me get a word in edgeways. I just got shouted at, and they called back an interview.
Yeah, I was in a meeting, a presentation by Christiana Figueres, who of course oversaw talks for COPs going right back, and the government, is saying we mustn't engage now. MPs mustn't engage with anyone who threatens the status quo. And she stood on the stage at the Royal Society of Arts, an establishment, building, group, organization, and she said things have to change. She said, and I think that this applies across the board. She said that the main attribute that we have to have as climate terrified is courage. Rather than any sort of fight or flight, it's courage just to stand up to these people, and that's from someone high up in the UN establishment. In fact, the UN have come out many times worried about the way the government here and the press and GB News is denigrating anyone who is concerned about their children and climate.
Thank you. And this new so-called new definition of extremism, one of the sections of that is saying that anything that is a threat to liberal democracy, and obviously Extinction Rebellion, we stand for deliberative democracies, and our third demand, it always has been to empower ordinary people in politics. And you could easily argue that, if GB News get their way and allow the climate breakdown to continue to unfold, then we're going to see a breakdown of law and order. And
no extremists on a dead planet. So,
absolutely. All right. So, yeah, we're going over to the other site now, GB News, and stay tuned for more action.
Okay, so this is Extinction Rebellion outside one of the studios and offices of GB News in London. We have come here today to take dynamic action because this news organisation not only refuses to tell the truth, it is a major source of disinformation on a crucial national security issue. Let's be absolutely clear about this. Climate breakdown is a crucial national security issue. In 2022, 3,271 people in the UK were killed by the record-breaking heat waves. Now, you could argue that they are mostly elderly people and they were perhaps getting close towards the end of their lives. But the fact of the matter is that climate breakdown is now beginning to hit agriculture hard. The recent record-breaking floods that have occurred have done severe damage to agriculture here in the UK. Droughts in Spain, where we get a lot of our fresh fruit and veg from, are also being badly disrupted by extremes of drought. Now, these are national security issues. Let's just remind ourselves what's actually happening in the Horn of Africa and across the Sahel region. Over 100 million people are suffering food insecurity, going hungry, and people are starving. 100,000 people were killed in 2023 because of climate breakdown, because of climate breakdown and the record-breaking drought that had gone into the 6th year. Now, these are crimes against humanity. We do not have to do this. This happens because news outlets like GB News continually campaign in favour of all fossil fuel activities. So this is not only a key national security issue for us, but it's about killing hundreds of thousands of the world's poorest, most vulnerable people. Now, that, any way you look at it, that is a crime against humanity. Now, if you think in terms of rising sea levels and the annihilation of several low-lying island states like Tuvalu and Vanuatu, if you pursue policies that you know will annihilate entire nations, that is an act of genocide. So that's what gives us the right and the duty to come here today to protest outside GB News. We're taking dynamic action to bring a message to GB News staff that they must not be involved in disinformation, in lying to the public, lying to audiences, and vigorously promoting fossil fuel activities. Now, third, GB News presenters are actively promoting climate disinformation. They either pretend that climate change isn't real or that it's not dangerous. Perhaps it's something that they portray as being a problem for the future. Now, it's a third of their presenters are actively involved in disinformation. And the other 2/3, they're not telling the people the whole truth. If you just think in terms of the record-breaking heat waves that we've seen around the globe over the last year, that has got scientists really worried. Now, this is a climate emergency. We've used those words for years, but we really mean it, and the scientists really mean it. This isn't a time for grossly irresponsible, callous staff at GB News to carry on lying to the public, to carry on campaigning in favour of ongoing fossil fuel use. We need emergency action to decarbonise, and that's why we've come here today to cover the front of the building in fake oil. Yeah, it does wash off. It does wash off. Unlike the guilt on the hands of those people who have been responsible for getting, in GB News, who are responsible for getting people killed, both in the UK and hundreds of thousands of people killed every year abroad. That happens because news organisations still refuse to tell the truth about the gravity of the threat. Now, why would GB News do such a callous and cruel thing? Could it be that Paul Marshall, the owner, CEO of the company, Marshall Wace, could it be that he has so many fossil fuel interests himself and that his company, his hedge fund, invests heavily in fossil fuels? Well, that is almost certainly the case. That we see a number of people being hired here, presenters like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nigel Farage, two notorious climate change deniers, who continually spread lies non-stop all the time to their audiences, and they divert attention away from the absolute crisis that has now befallen us. As I say, this is a crucial national security issue, and this company here, this news provider, is willfully and deliberately acting to get people killed. Now, Michael Gove, a few days ago, was talking about extremism, extremists here in the UK. Well, what's your definition of an extremist? Is an extremist somebody who campaigns to get people killed? Is an extremist somebody who incites that violence of destroying agriculture across the Sahel? That's what an extremist is. Surely that has to be a definition of what extremism is. This idea that you're going to promote a series of activities which you know will kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. And you're not just going to say, oh, we want to slow the pace of decarbonising, that actively campaign in favour of expanding polluting industries. They campaign against ULEZ. They campaign against LTNs. They campaign against 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. Anything that might free people to be able to walk and cycle in safety in towns and cities, they will campaign against. They even campaign against heat pumps. Anything that might save energy. Anything that might result in people being compelled, forced to use more fossil fuels than they need to. And it's relentless. It goes on continually. Now, if I were to go on news on this show, one of their shows here, and I have been on once, all you get is just being shouted at. People just, the presenters sometimes just shout at people they disagree with. That's like bumping into somebody in a road rage accident. You've come across a thug on the streets, and all they're going to do is shout at you. That's not debate. There's nothing at all that's uplifting or educational or informative taking place in this building or in any of their studios. This is the opposite of news gathering. This is the opposite of impartiality. This is cruel, this is heartless, it's callous, and it's irresponsible. Now, everybody has a right to freedom of speech, and we in Exile wholly agree with that. But you know, in law, there are limits to freedom of speech. And the limits to freedom of speech are incitement to violence, incitement to get people killed. That is exactly what they do. That is exactly what's happening in that building. So we are upholding the law. These people here, they're upholding the law. You may look at these people and say that they're taking dynamic action to stop GB News, but they are upholding the law. They're trying to stop these people from killing. It's a very basic, simple principle that everybody ought to understand. So here today, you'll see a number of placards, a number of posters here. If you just want to look at some of these, like cut the ties to fossil fuels. The link is crystal clear between the company that owns GB News and fossil fuel interests. So it's repeated across here, and the big banner across there, cut the ties to fossil fuels. It is absolutely crystal clear that Marshall Wace, the company that owns this, and Paul Wace is a major figure in Marshall Wace, that their links to fossil fuels are absolutely crystal clear. And that should not be allowed to happen here in the UK. When you've got an industry that poses such a threat to UK national security, then surely you should have a distance between those fossil fuel interests and a broadcaster. Now, GB News, they say that they're quite small and they only have a small audience. And relatively small numbers do actually watch their TV channels. But they actually have quite a large following with their various video clips on YouTube and other social media sites. So they actually are influential, and they're dangerous, and they're damaging, and they do get people killed. This constant flow of disinformation from GB News here to the public is incredibly dangerous. So that is why today Extinction Rebellion has come here to take dynamic action in the attempt to stop GB News from killing people. If they respected life, if the staff there respected life, right now they would demand change. So just scanning upwards here. And I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here. We don't have an interviewer today, so it's John Fuller here, Tell the Truth campaigner with Extinction Rebellion. And we're outside the offices of GB News here, close to Paddington in West London. So today, if you didn't hear what I just said a moment ago, I'm just going to reiterate again on the Exile live stream that we are taking dynamic action against GB News because of its constant flow of disinformation to its audiences. Now, what's so crucial about this is that GB News gets people killed. And it gets people killed by campaigning relentlessly in favour of fossil fuel interests, to campaign in favour of the expansion of aviation, to campaign against heat pumps. And, okay, I think I'm probably asked just to wrap up at this point. We're going to go to another speaker. Okay, that's John Fuller here, outside.
Go now. It's live now.
Hi everyone, so we are here, if you just see up on the roof here, we've got activists on top of Marshall Wace, which is the biggest, one of the biggest investment hedge funds in the world. The chairman actually owns GB News as well, which is a notorious media organisation. I mean, what this essentially means is if you've got the money and you're making loads of money from fossil fuel investments, then they basically just buy up media organisations, make one themselves called GB News. He's also trying to buy the Telegraph newspaper and the Spectator purely to peddle disinformation, lies, and to bake in the ultimate extinction of all life on Earth if we carry on this current trajectory. So we've got someone here on the scene who's got this nice poster here, brandishing the CEO. Would you like to tell us a bit about why you're here today?
Yes, I'm here because we've got to cut the ties with fossil fuels if we're going to survive. And this man has got no interest in doing that. In fact, the opposite. He just wants to keep fossil fuels alive, and he's deceiving us in this action. And the global injustice of it all is terrible. People are having to move from their home countries. People are at war. People are not surviving. We're getting more and more floods, more and more fires, and they're just ignoring it. And in fact, deceiving us with companies like GB News, which are the ultimate in deception and lies.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I was saying earlier, I've been on GB News, I've been interviewed, and the presenter just wouldn't let me get a word in edgeways, and just shut me down at every second they had. And I noticed it says extremists on the bottom here, and I understand there's been this new definition from a supposedly independent definition from Lord Warney, saying that you can now be extremist even if you're not violent, but if you're contributing towards hatred and intolerance. And surely this is exactly what GB News is doing. Whilst it seems we've got protesters over here being stopped and searched and maybe even arrested, do you think the police might go in there and arrest them today?
Yes, well, we've just got to continue protesting. I'm lucky, I'm old, it doesn't actually matter. I've got to do this for the next generation, and I really, really feel that. And I feel stronger today that that's what I've got to do than I did yesterday and the day before. The injustice of it is just totally wrong. And that's all I can say, really.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming out. And as you can see, we've got the drummers have now joined us on the scene. And say again? Okay, well, yeah, just gonna get a little bit of separation from the sound of the drums. As much as we love it, it seems that someone's being stopped and searched here. This is another power that the police now have. I understand they can stop and search anyone without pretty much any reason. So yeah, this is outside Marshall Wace here in Sloane Square, and the reason we're here today is basically Marshall Wace are one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. The chairman also owns GB News. You probably saw earlier on the video, we've got activists outside GB News as well. I believe there's a Pinocchio there as well. So we're just asking them, surely if we lived in a democracy, then we would be able to rely on the people that are giving us the information in the mainstream, on our TVs, in our newspapers, so that we as a general public, employees, and whatever it is you do, can make well-informed decisions about who we vote for, and also to deeply understand the nature of the climate and biodiversity crisis that we are in. Instead, a third of their presenters are pushing climate disinformation. Over half of them are outright, completely against climate action. So that doesn't just mean like protesting here today, us exercising our democratic right to protest, but that just means like any policy from the government, which, a net zero policy or, ULEZ or whatever it may be, that Paul Marshall also owns an article, a paper, I believe it's called Unheard. And, it's all about culture wars, wokeness, and it's essentially just trying to split us amongst ourselves. So, we've got working people arguing amongst themselves. And what the thing that I find most shocking as someone that grew up on a council estate, the working people, it now seems, are actually inadvertently, unknowingly supporting the policies which best serve the interests of the fossil fuel cartel. So, this hedge fund has 112 investments in different fossil fuel entities. They're crooks. And we're gonna go back over now to the other side of GB News. So thanks for joining us, and stay tuned.
I'm taking action at GB News because I want to shine a light on those who are enabling and profiting from the climate emergency at a time when millions of people are suffering the consequences of climate breakdown. And as a mother and a primary school teacher, I encouraged my children and those that I taught to tell the truth. And I've nurtured 5-year-olds so that they can develop a strong moral compass. And if they can do it, it makes me so angry that the likes of Paul Marshall, co-founder and co-owner of GB News, promote lies and spread disinformation and climate science denial. Today we're facing the biggest threat that humanity has ever known, and we're on track for 3 degrees of warming, which means an unlivable future. It's something that's hard even to begin to comprehend. But what's even more difficult to understand is that fossil fuel companies know that they're causing this destruction, and they use media outlets like GB News to spread disinformation about the climate crisis. In 2022, more than half of GB News presenters were explicitly biased against climate action, and GB News is currently facing 13 Ofcom investigations into allegations of lack of impartiality and fairness. People deserve to know the truth about what's going on. And alongside this, I think about what world my generation is going to pass on to young people today.
Okay, so here we are back outside Marshall Wace, and it seems someone is being arrested now. I'm curious how the police are arresting someone that's been outside protesting at this extremist organisation behind us, which is ultimately peddling the genocide of humanity if we continue to double down on the fossil fuel addiction with 112 investments in these various fossil fuel entities. So stay tuned to see what else is unfolding down here at Marshall Wace. We've got another interview for you lined up now. So we're just going to hear a little bit, just going to hear a little bit more from Tom here. Tom, you just told me a little bit about Ofcom, which are the regulator of the media entities in the UK, and how they're not essentially serving their main purpose.
What's happening with the media in general is the regulators are being captured. We know that the government has tried to put Paul Dacre of the Daily Mail in charge of Ofcom. They failed, but they did get another government placement in there, which is, I assume, why for all of GB News' flouting of obvious rules on impartiality, there's been no action taken against them. And they've got the fig leaf of being deemed not a news channel. Again, brazen, absolutely brazen. But it applies to all media at the moment, all right-wing, all of the billionaire press. IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organization, has also been captured. The only people on the complaints committee are the very editors of the newspapers that are being complained about, which means that no one has ever been fined by IPSO since its start. Everything is under the thumb of these extremists.
Thank you, and I understand that there's this revolving door as well among our politicians. So, you can see GB News has been set up, and it specifically platforms as a particular type of MP or politician from our so-called democracy.
As I say, the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, who are the parliamentary wing of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, 2 degrees of separation. All roads lead to Tufton Street. The more that we can get the word out that this is all to do with the extremist views of Tufton Street, the better. The Legatum Institute is it's sort of American based, and their bedfellows are the Heartland Institute, which has compared climate activists with mass murderers. They've made that comparison with Charles Manson.
Right, non-violent climate.
Non-violent. So they've made this violent association. And that's the insidious thing that, as I say, Christiana Figueres says that we need to have the courage to confront.
Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, like, for me, the fossil fuel cartel are committing the worst humanitarian crimes. Hopefully, they'll be tried in court or ecocide at some point, but we're not quite there yet.
Well, let's hope that we have a plan to try them on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that start. So, is it as simple as to say that, ultimately you could say, well, everybody's entitled to a political position. Everyone, we want freedom of speech, but at the same time, that's fine. But if we follow the money, we've clearly got a guy up here worth £800 million, which is great, fine. I'm sure everyone would love all that money. But what he's doing is he's investing in 112 fossil fuel entities at the same time as buying up media organisations and spreading information which only serves his investments.
And this cancer, as I say, is now spreading to his desire to own the Telegraph and the Spectator, to cover all bases. Yeah.
So this is the working of a cartel. Whilst we're told at the same time that this is a democracy and a so-called free press. I've seen it in the airline industry. Even the unions, they've been captured where you've got people, senior employees of airlines, and working for the unions, and the unions just repeating the same narratives from the industry, slightly different, but it's all part of the desperation, it seems, of the fossil fuel industry to just double down on their addiction.
Well, I'd like to think it's panic on their part, but what they are is following the Goebbels dictum of tell a lie often enough, and you get traction. So,
well, thanks again for coming out and for giving us that extra information. So, yeah, if you have just joined us, as you can see, we're here outside Marshall Wace, which is one of the world's biggest hedge funds. I believe they're investing either 1.8 billion or 2.2 billion, for what it matters, 1.8 billion in the fossil fuel economy. Yeah, so thanks for joining, and we're going over to the other DB News side now, I believe.
Hi, my name is Ines. Why am I here? I'm here because there is no day when I don't hear about the devastating consequences of the climate crisis. It is enough to say that this February was the hottest month ever. But also there is no day when I don't hear about policies that simply do not make sense. That the UK government has approved dozens of new fossil fuel projects, and that it plans new gas-fired power stations to be built well into the 2030s. There is no day when I don't hear about new denials, misinformation, and downright lies about the severity of the situation. Marshall Wace is a clear example of these contradictions and shameless lies. Marshall Wace, one of the world's largest hedge funds with a huge financial stake in the fossil fuel industry, that dares to speak of sustainable investing and stewardship approach. And to top it all, the chair of Marshall Wace is also co-owner of GB News. You must be familiar with GB News, where 1 in 3 presenters regularly cast doubts on climate science. So what can I do but being here today? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Marcus. I'm 69, and I'm fed up with this crazy big money, oily money, wheel of fortune that's going on here behind me. The oil industry makes lots of money, and Sir Paul Marshall, funnels that through his hedge fund. And with that, the profits from that, a small amount of it goes into his propaganda machine, which is here behind me, GB News. They bring out their right-wing extremists, Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg and so forth. They whip up right-wing frenzy that influences government and voting patterns. That means the government can then be influenced into making breaks and tax breaks and other incentives for the oil industry. And the whole thing just keeps going round and round. It's crazy, and I'm tired of it. And I think the country is tired of it.
Hello, my name's Teresa, and I'm here today to call out the bankrolling that is going on and the GB News funding of climate science denial. In a week where the Michael Gove announced a new definition of extremism and a further crackdown on protesters like me who are here peacefully protesting for a future for the whole planet, it seems incredible that Sir Paul Marshall is continuing to fund climate science denial. We want the police to deal with the real extremists here. And those are people inside this building, presenters of GB News, people like Lee Anderson, who has been Islamophobic, has had the Conservative Party whip taken away from for his Islamism, has been the Reform Party. People like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has actually said that people who are involved in anti-fracking are funded by Putin. This spreading of climate science denial has to stop. The GB News is currently under 13 Ofcom investigations into alleged breaches of impartiality and fairness. So how can Paul Marshall fund, and he's a donor to the Tory party, so much climate science denial at a time when we had the hottest year ever last year and we are heading rapidly towards an unlivable future? I don't feel that I can do anything else but be here and do my best to stop that.
Marshall Wace, co-founded and chaired by Paul Marshall, is one of the biggest hedge funds in the UK, and it has huge financial stakes in the fossil fuel industry. That same Paul Marshall also is the co-owner and lead investor in GB News, one of the UK's largest media companies. It's therefore not surprising that GB News continues to spread incredibly damaging climate scepticism. In 2022, 1 in 3 of GB News' presenters spread outright climate denial or misinformation. It's blindingly obvious that GB News, who makes routine losses, exists to prop up the fossil fuel infrastructure that so many of its members have stakes in, while the coming floods and food shortages are going to have massive impacts on the lives and livelihoods of the global majority, including me and my family. People like Paul Marshall are making obscene profits from the fossil fuel industry that is destroying our future. It is so appalling that while millionaires and billionaires get richer and richer off the back of the polluting industry such as the fossil fuel industry, normal families are unable to afford the basic necessities that they need to survive, like food. And you would think that this would be illegal, and it should therefore come as no surprise that the Tory party has major donations from Paul Marshall as well. It's no coincidence that someone with so much vested interest in the fossil fuel industry has such power over the media and the government. This is a calculated and widespread attack on our right to a livable future for the sake of a couple of extra digits in the bank account of one guy, Paul Marshall. I think that everybody in the UK should know his name, know that Paul Marshall is selling our future. The science is unequivocal, and it has been for years. If we want a habitable planet, then we must stop the fossil fuel industry and its puppets, such as GB News.
I'm here today outside of GB News because I believe that they are spreading flagrant climate propaganda. The link between the hedge fund Marshall Wace and GB News is very close. The co-owner of GB News is also the one of the leaders of Marshall Wace, and Marshall Wace has 1.8 billion worth of shares in fossil fuels, and so it's no surprise that GB News is constantly spouting climate propaganda. In 2022, 1 in 3 of their presenters spread outright climate denial or misinformation on their platform. We have to cut the ties to fossil fuels and stop spreading lies for the sake of profit.
So hello again. We are outside Marshall Wace, one of the world's biggest hedge funds, but currently invested in 112 fossil fuel companies. We've got more police arriving on the scene. So with that in mind, I just wanted to read a little bit from some of the notes I have here and why we'll be calling on the police to investigate the extremists working at GB News. Obviously, Marshall Wace, chairman Paul Marshall, is the co-founder of GB News, and he's trying to buy the Telegraph and the Spectator. So very relevant to our moment in politics. So it says here that extreme founder and extremist presenters. So Paul Marshall, believed to be preparing a takeover bid for historic The Telegraph and The Spectator, has been caught liking extremist racist content with one of his Twitter accounts. Marshall has repeatedly liked and retweeted extremist content from an array of far-right and conspiracy theorist accounts for months, endorsing tweets that call for mass deportations and suggest a civil war between native Europeans, in brackets, and, quote, fake refugee invaders is imminent. In January 2024, he liked another which warned that, quote, if we want European civilization to survive, we need to not just close the borders, but start mass expulsions immediately. We don't stand a chance unless we start that process very, very soon, end quote. Furthermore, Lee Anderson, one of the presenters, is said always a vocal backer of new fossil fuel extraction, no surprise. In brackets, 30p Lee was suspended from the Conservative Party after saying that, in brackets, Islamists had got control of London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who is a Muslim, adding that the mayor had given our capital city away to his mates. He has since joined Reform UK, who peddle a combination of racial hatred and outright climate science denial. Wonderful. And next we've got Richard Tice, who's famous for his anti-immigration propaganda catchphrase, "We want our country back." Toxic Tice spreads racial hatred to achieve his political aims. The campaign at Leave.eu was a combination of dog whistling and xenophobia and anti-immigration advertisements, pro-fracking, anti-science, e.g., in brackets, less CO2 equals less plant growth equals less, more expensive food, and zero evidence will make any difference to warming. So outright climate denial there. And not forgetting Nigel Farage, of course, whose notorious Breaking Point poster owed much to the 1930s Nazi propaganda and was described as a blatant attempt to incite racial hatred. Farage has also cast doubt on climate science on a number of occasions, and both UKIP and the Brexit Party have fielded numerous climate science denying candidates. And in brackets here, I think wind energy is the biggest collective economic insanity I've seen in my entire life. I've never seen anything more stupid, more illogical, or more irrational, end quote. Jacob Rees-Mogg, let's not forget him either. He's been on GB News since, on GB News on the 20th of June 2023. He was talking about fracking and North Sea drilling. And he basically went and said, what we need to do is scrap the ban on new petrol and diesel cars, reverse the upcoming enforcement of heat pumps in new buildings, give more licenses to the North Sea for oil drilling, and lift the fracking moratorium, end quote. An extremist climate denying position that, if adopted by the UK, could result in uncontrollable increases in temperature, leading to the deaths of millions. He's also falsely claimed that anti-fracking groups were funded by the Russian predator. So other links here, we've got, he wants to shape our wider culture. So Paul Marshall is essentially buying up a bunch of media outlets to change the narrative. And obviously, you know, we need media. We need media organisations informing the general public so that they can use their democratic power to vote for the right politicians. But instead, if you can own one of the world's biggest hedge funds and you've got all of this excess capital, which is literally making money from the fossil fuel cartel, destroying all life on Earth, then your interests seemingly are to delay and deny the climate science, which, you know, over 50% of the presenters on GB News are doing so. Here we are outside Marshall Wace today. You can see they've been covered in a symbolic version of washable oil to highlight the way in which this building is complicit in the genocide. And, the United Nations General Secretary has said that climate activists are not the dangerous radicals any government which continues to pursue new oil licenses are. And since that statement was made, the UK government, backed by GB News, most of the GB News presenters, in fact, that are against net zero, are now coming out and they're supporting this 100 new oil licenses in the midst of this climate breakdown, when we're seeing tipping points on the verge of being breached, if not being breached, around the world. So we've got Paul Marshall up on the posters here, and we're going back over to GB News now. Thank you. Hello again. So in short, we're outside Marshall Wace. This organisation, this hedge fund, is responsible for 1.8 billion in investments in 112 fossil fuel entities. They're buying up media organisations to spout climate science denial and misinformation. There's a new definition of extremism which is recently being pushed through Parliament, and we believe that the extremists in this building, under this new definition, are a threat to our liberal democracy. If we continue to allow the extremists who are intent on prioritising profit above the health and well-being of people and planet, then we could well see a societal collapse, even in this country, where many countries are already experiencing that and have been experiencing the impacts of colonialism and climate change for almost over 500 years now. So thanks so much for joining us. Please do like and share this video. We need to get the message out there to ordinary people and help them understand that we cannot trust the media organisations. We can't even trust Ofcom, the regulators, who have this revolving door between the industry, the fossil fuel industry, politicians, and this media organisation. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again on the next action.
son, and nor does it mean anything. Heed the word and be the living proof. The sun couldn't get out of bed, we didn't see it for weeks. This here ain't water, son, it's a whip a shale wind come to smack the day onto your cheeks. This here ain't water, just another cup of something, another man painted by his curse. This here ain't water, son, and nor does it weigh anything, but it will always pull you closer to the earth. This here ain't water, but it was offered me to drink. When everyone knows thirsty, what am I to think? This here ain't water, but it keeps me off the brink. When everyone knows thirsty, what am I to drink? Is it all this weather we've been having? Is that why everyone seems so blue? Got me dancing, sliding in claret stew, spreading strokes with jiving boots, fuel on neon fumes. But the gods spare us the weather, or whoever. Store-bought Normans, farm-bred and neck-pecking. It's not their fault, we're all the same. Force-fed and fenced in, it's like a cult out here. Even the lonely ones seem to bow to something that's so hard to understand. That keeps alone and feeds a western right to sadness. Holding at the moon for the right to croon. Standing on a history of factory fodder, on planned madness. For me, sir, the floor, words escape me. Has anything ever changed? Ever? At all?